Hi there, it's Mr. Clark. Welcome to lesson 12.5.1 on the exposition of sonata form. So in this section, we're going to be looking just at a single form called sonata form. We've looked at some shorter instrumental forms in 10.4 and some vocal forms in 11.5. And sonata form is by far the most complex form that we have looked at so far. It developed in the classical era, roughly the 1700s, particularly towards the end of the 1700s, and it provided a way to organize longer pieces of music. When you have shorter pieces of music, binary, ternary form work pretty well. Rondo starts to get a little bit longer, a lot of repetition of material, and composers wanted other ways to organize long instrumental pieces. Long vocal pieces are easy, like operas, because they have like a plot and narration and stuff like that. But longer instrumental pieces needed some form of organization. So the sonata form was developed, and it appears in a lot of instrumental works of the time. Some chamber music for smaller groups, and also the first and last movements of symphonies. Historically, sonata form developed out of a rounded binary form, where you have your A section, and then you have your B A prime section. The main material occurs in the A and then the A prime, and then you have that little bit of B. It's a small diversion, the Monte, Ponte, Fonte business. But as rounded binary forms started getting longer, the B section started gaining some more importance and got longer, and it turned sonata form into more of a ternary form, where you have these three parts: your initial A part, called the exposition, your middle B part, called the development, and then your A prime part, called the recapitulation. So we're going to go through each of those in order. So to do that, we're going to be looking at a sonata by Muzio Clementi, just to give an example of typical sonata form. So this one was written in 1784, his Opus 12, number 1, and we're going to listen to sections and kind of talk through it. So before we even start listening, well, what key are we in? We have B flats and E flats, and then we're outlining a B flat major triad here. So that seems pretty clear that we're starting in B flat major. And this first section of the exposition is going to be called the primary thematic area, or PTA for short. And it occurs first and it establishes the first key of the sonata. So let's see what's going on phrase-wise here. So that feels like a complete idea. Moving back here. Nope, not that far. Why can't I get in between? Come on, YouTube. Yeah, so here we had and it felt like it could end there, but then it repeated back, and it's like, oh no, that wasn't quite the end of the phrase. We're gonna keep going. And then it just kept going. And then it moves into a different feel here. So cadence-wise, it's looking like we have 5, 5, or 5, 5, 1. So perfect authentic cadence there. And then we're going to keep going. Looks like we're still in B flat right now. Just going back and forth between tonic and dominant. Okay, well that's a pretty conclusive end. Nope, didn't want to go full screen. Just there. Yep. And what kind of cadence is that? Well, we have a 1 chord followed by a 5 chord. And if we end on a 5 chord, it's got to be a half cadence. So far, just to show what we have, we mentioned that sonata form has 3 big sections: your exposition, your development, and your recap. And the exposition is all that we're worrying about for today, but that's our big A, B, A prime business. And the first part of exposition is the primary thematic area, and its job is to introduce your first key. We've done that. We're pretty firmly in B flat major at this point. So let's go back and listen to see what happens next. Well, that was sounding similar, but now it's going off in a different direction. A lot of E naturals. And now this is definitely different, both in terms of character, but also in terms of key. It looks like we've gone to F major. So, we started in B flat major, and we ended up in F major. So this is the end of our primary thematic area. Ended on a half cadence. And then the next phrase started in B flat major, started exactly the same as the beginning, but somehow we transitioned to F major. Fancy music term is modulation, but in this case we are in sonata form, we call this a transition. And the purpose of the transition is to transition us from our first key in the primary thematic area to another key. And that's what it does. So it starts out the same. The technical term for this is a dependent transition because it's dependent on the material from the beginning, from your first thematic area. You can also have independent transitions that are just totally different. This one just happens to be dependent. I'm going to start introducing those E naturals. Not going to do a full harmonic analysis, but we have F, B flat, tonicizing our dominant, and we end on a half cadence in F. So that's our transition. So just add that to our diagram. We now have a transition. So we start in tonic, and our transition goes somewhere else. And that somewhere else is going to be our second thematic area. That makes sense. Or secondary thematic area. Primary thematic area, secondary thematic area. So we go from one to somewhere. The somewhere depends on the piece. It's going to be a different key. If you're in major, then 5, modulating to major 5 is pretty common. And that is in fact what we do here, B flat to 5. B flat to F is 1 to 5. If you're in a minor key, it's common to modulate to flat 3, the relative major, or minor 5. And then the style also contrasts. Usually it's going to be more lyrical. So let's see what happens here. Yeah, it's calmer. They're playing a little bit slower, very smooth. Okay. Now it feels like we're heading somewhere. Oh no, we just get another phrase. Okay. Okay. Potential 6/4, 5/7, and we get a big cadence there. That was very satisfying, very exciting. And that big cadence at the end of your secondary thematic area, that really confirms, yes, we are in this new key, is known as your essential expositional closure, because it closes the exposition, and it's an essential part of sonata form. The whole exposition is moving towards this cadence, because we start somewhere, and then we go on a journey in our transition. We're going somewhere. We reach another place in our secondary thematic area, but that big cadence at the end is really what confirms, oh yeah, we have arrived in this new key. So that's our essential expositional closure. That's the goal that the entire exposition's been pushing towards, but then there's a little bit afterwards. So this part we just call the closing, and that's still going to be in our new key. And that's just anything that occurs after our essential expositional closure. And here, it's pretty common. It's just going to be going back and forth between 1 and 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, So, nothing exciting, just doing that. So, if you recall from rounded binary form, your A section is always repeated. In early sonata form, this stayed, and the exposition was pretty much always repeated. As sonatas got longer, this became less of a thing, these repeats disappeared, but if you see a repeat sign in a sonata form, it's not just a clue, but in fact, it's telling you where the exposition ends. And then you'd repeat back to the beginning, do it again. We don't need to do that. That's what's going on here, and I'll see you next time for the development.